Guys, welcome back to the video on the channel. Today we are going to be ranking championship managers on their job security. So this isn't going to be based on my opinion on them personally as managers and their actual managerial ability. Instead, we're going to be ranking it on how secure I think they are in their current job. And I'd be interested to get your guys' verdict on this one down below as well. As always, if you're going to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. 350 likes would be massively appreciated. But these are the following categories we are going to be chucking every championship manager into. We've got could be first to go, under pressure, variable, so it's a little bit unpredictable really, and it's very much dependent on how the next few weeks and months go. He'll be fine, or their job is secure. Want to get your guys' verdict on your current manager down below. Where would you place them into this tier list? And if you would like to see me do this a few times throughout the season, because obviously these rankings change very much with the results, then do let me know. Without any further ado though, let's jump into it. We'll go through the teams in a random order, and we may as well start out with Blackburn, as they are currently flying high in at the top of the championship. Jon Dahl Tomasson, I think he'll be fine. I think that Blackburn have proven, especially under Mowbray, that even when things do start to unravel a little bit for a manager, you know, we saw Blackburn have quite a few patchy spells under Mowbray in seasons gone by. They've always been reluctant to go ahead and remove him from that post, and Blackburn always seem to come out of the other end as well. I expect the same will be with Tomasson as well. Despite his lack of experience in English football, he's already started out like an absolute house on fire, and I think that things would need to go disastrously wrong for him to be fearful for his job this season in at Blackburn. In terms of a could be first to go, I'm going to chuck Dean Smith there in there for Norwich as things stand. Now, I still think that he has got a little bit of time to go ahead and turn things around, and while the results haven't been there for Norwich so far this season, there have been elements of performances that if things do start to swing in the final third, then maybe they will shoot up the championship. You know, this isn't the first time we've seen Norwich start slowly. However, with Dean Smith, I think he's got less in the bank than someone like a Daniel Farke would have, who obviously was given that time to go ahead and get things right. The money that's been spent within this squad as well on a couple of expensive additions, that goes ahead and adds the pressure, as well as the expectations that are there that this Norwich squad should be bouncing back at the first time of asking as well. So Dean Smith, as things stand, could be the first to go, in my opinion, if things don't change around quite sharpish. In terms of a job secure, I think Nathan Jones in at Luton, I think things would need to go unbelievably wrong for Nathan Jones to be anywhere near losing his job. The work he did there last season, the work he's previously done in his first stint at Luton as well, he'll be absolutely fine. Luton are generally on this upwards curve in terms of league finishes every season, and while they're still to get off the mark this season in terms of a win, I still think Nathan Jones is going to be absolutely fine this time around, and so will Luton on top of that. In terms of one that's maybe a little bit under pressure, I'm going to chuck Bruce in there. I'm between variable and under pressure. I just think because of how last season went for Bruce, the fact that there was no sort of managerial bounce there, and the way the sort of atmosphere had really soured at West Brom at the end of last season, the fact he's had the backing of some real quality additions into this squad this season, if West Brom aren't up and around the top six within the first, month or two of this season, I think the pressure massively piles on Bruce from that point onwards. The fact that there have been some stuttering performances up until this point as well, and the same problems from last season seem to be cropping up this time around, I think that also adds the pressure onto Bruce. So I don't think he's quite in the bottom category or could be first to go, but I do think there is pressure there under him because the expectations have risen on him this time around. Another he'll be fine, I think Alex Neil in at Sunderland. Really quite like what I've seen of Sunderland so far this season in the Championship, and really riding that wave of momentum from last season. The work he did there at Sunderland, I mean, they have been quite an unpredictable club in the past, but they'd be foolish, I think, to do anything with Alex Neil this season in terms of thinking about getting rid of him, and I'm sure that all the Sunderland fans are on the same page with that one as well. I think he'll be completely fine this season. A variable one, I'll go for Michael Beale at QPR, just because we don't have that much of a track record to go ahead and fall back on, and so this one's very much dependent on how, the first 6 months of this season goes for him. Are QPR at that level that we expect them to be at? If I'm being honest, I think he probably probably will be fine this season and he will be at that level, but because we don't have that track record of some of these other managers to fall back on, I'll put him in that variable 1 for the time being. Another variable 1, I'll put Shota Arveladze into variable, not because, you know, I mean, I think he's got the complete backing of the fan base there, the ownership as well, that's been seen by all the changes going on with that club in terms of the playing personnel and the money that's actually been put in there, but there is a certain level of unpredictability that comes with new ownership. Obviously, this is the first full season that we've got to experience of Hull's new ownership, and while it has been a good start to the season so far, with new owners often does come that little bit of unpredictability, and on top of that as well, the expectations have also really risen at Hull for this season. Last year, I think the expectation was set at survival. This time, there is that hope and thought that they will push on, especially with all the investment that has gone into the squad there. So yeah, going off the first few weeks of the season, I think he'll be fine, but if not, there is maybe that little bit of unpredictability. With Ryan Lowe in at Preston, I think he'll be fine this season. I think that Frankie McAvoy was an exception to this really because of his lack of experience, but generally speaking, Preston have been really reluctant to sack managers in the past, sometimes even maybe to our detriment, but yeah, and the way the momentum seems to be shifting at Preston as well, very much heading in an upwards curve since Ryan Lowe has come in. I think he'll be totally fine this season. Like what I've seen from North End so far this season, this time around as well, and things would need to go disastrously wrong, I think, for him to be sacked this season. Now, Danny Schofield got a massive statement win at the weekend, 3-1 against Stoke. With that being said, I still think he's in the conversation at this stage as the first manager to go. You know, if Huddersfield were to then go on and still lose, you know, the next 3 championship matches, I still think there is a conversation to be had then over his future. It comes back to that lack of managerial experience, a few uncertainties at Huddersfield as well with the quality that has been lost in that squad, and him needing to turn around this sort of negative momentum. If the weekend can be that for Huddersfield, then fair play. But on the general average level of performance that we've seen from Huddersfield so far this season, we'll wait and see if, you know, Saturday was a sign of things to come or it was an exception, because prior to that, I mean, they've been pretty dismal. Vincent Kompany in at Burnley, I think he'll be fine this season. I think that Burnley have completely reshaped the outlook of their club in the blueprint of Vincent Kompany, really. You know, they've totally committed to this rebuild, bringing in the brand of players that he wants to. And I think on top of that as well, the pressure isn't instantly on Kompany like it might be with some of the other bigger spenders in the Championship. Because of the nature of players they've brought in, they've very much targeted, you know, young and upcoming players who they think will grow with the squad and the manager, and for that reason I think Kompany will be fine this time around. You know, a win, draw and a loss in terms of Burnley in the league so far this season, but I think Burnley and Kompany are there for a long-term project, which is the reason I think he'll be fine this season. Another manager under pressure, I'm going to put Nigel Pearson in there. I was quite positive on Bristol City before this season had started, but on the showings that we've seen from them so far this season, it's just the same mistakes which keep popping up. Last season was really patchy for Bristol City in terms of their form throughout the entire season, and on the showings that we've seen from them this far into the year, however early on it may be, it's the same mistakes which are cropping up, and from that I think pressure will come on him. Gary Rowett in at Millwall. Millwall, really solid and stable Championship club. I think his job's pretty secure at this stage, if I'm being honest. He's been the Millwall manager since 2019, I think, closing in now on 150 games in charge of that side as well. Things would need to go disastrously wrong for Millwall to make a change in that aspect, and I think Rowett's bought into the club, and yeah, I can't see him being under pressure anytime soon, if I'm being honest. In terms of a manager that is under pressure though, Michael O'Neill in at Stoke, I definitely do think that pressure is there. I think that I'm with a few people in thinking that I was a little bit surprised that at one stage in the second half of last season, I was surprised that Stoke didn't go ahead and make that change from O'Neill and look for a little bit of a fresh outlook going into this season. You know, it's been several seasons of vast underachievement now from Stoke in the Championship, and they now find themselves at this point. It's not been a particularly inspiring start to the season for Stoke either, and from that I do think comes pressure, albeit Stoke have proven so far that even in the tough spells, they have been willing to stick by O'Neill, and that's the reason I'm not going to, you know, chuck him into that category. But I do think there is a pressure there that is coming from the fan base. Whether that's shared by the hierarchy at the club, I guess we'll see. Now, based purely off results, it's been a brilliant start to life at Watford for Rob Edwards, but I think it'd be foolish to chuck him in any higher than variable, really, because of the nature of Watford Football Club. You know, you're only a few weeks away there from the sack, and I mean the expectations are massive at Watford. That's understandable. Edwards knew that when he was taking the job, but on seeing what we've seen from this Watford side so far, come through 3 really tough games up until this point, and there's still quite a bit to be done in the transfer market as well, which we'll talk about in a future transfer rumour roundup video. But yeah, for the time being, I'm going to put him in variable just because of how unpredictable Watford are. Chris Wilder in at Middlesbrough. There are definitely expectations which have been raised at Borough this time around, but I think Wilder will be fine this season. I think that everyone at Middlesbrough has fully bought into the Chris Wilder project, and I think we've seen flashes of just how good this Borough side could be this season, albeit that, you know, 100% consistency and the final project isn't quite polished off. They've still got a few things they need to go ahead and iron out. But Chris Wilder, one of the best managers in the Championship. The backing's there from the ownership and the fan base. I think he'll be fine. Russell Martin in at Swansea. Now, at the start of the season, I probably would have chucked him in, he'll be fine. But right now, I would say it's maybe a little bit variable. I just think that year 2 into the Martin project, Swansea fans and the hierarchy there will want to see a clear line of progression. And so far this season, we've not quite got that, obviously. First half of last season, massively patchy. Second half of the season, we started to see a little bit more in terms of, you know, them scoring more goals, keeping things tighter at the back. If we don't see that little bit of a level up from Swansea this time around, I do think that pressure will start to come in from that point onwards. But as things stand right now, I think he's fine. But yeah, things can change quickly in football. Mark Robins in at Coventry. I'm going to put him in that job secure category. He's been the manager there since 2017. This season now he's closing in on 300 games managed for Coventry, and with time comes security. The club's fully bought into him, the fan bases as well, and generally speaking with Coventry, they have been on this upwards trajectory, which I envisage continuing this season under Robins. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that any Championship manager is without their flaws, but in terms of job security, undoubtedly he ranks one of the highest in the Championship. John Eustace in at Birmingham. A tough one to judge, really, because the expectations aren't massive on him at Birmingham. The threshold is literally, you know, achieve survival for this season, and then we'll, you know, progress from that point onwards. There have been some points to note about Birmingham so far this season in terms of promise, potentially, in terms of, you know, that opening day draw, the win on game week 2 as well. For the time being, I'm going to chuck him into variable, similar to Michael Beale in at QPR. That lack of experience to go ahead and fall back on makes him a little bit unpredictable, and generally speaking, Birmingham as a football club are massively unpredictable as well, and the churn they've had of managers over these last 5 years has been absolutely chaotic, to say the least. But yeah, there have been some positives so far, albeit I'd still say it's variable in terms of job security. Michael Appleton at Blackpool. I think I'd chuck him into variable as well. I do think there is some pressure probably being put on him from the fan base and things like that, but the club handed him a 4-year contract. I mean, that is a statement of trust right there. There are some cause for concern, you know, issues that have popped up with Blackpool in their opening 3 matches so far. Obviously, that defeat at the weekend wasn't great, albeit I don't think that was really on Appleton. You know, they had the chances to go ahead and win that game. Listen, Critchley was always going to be a tough act to follow, and so far they haven't got the players over the line in the window that they have wanted to. So Appleton at Blackpool, I feel that one's very much variable on results that happen over these next couple of months. I think we said this at the start of the season, he was probably the most backed person to be sacked first when they asked the question, and I do think that Ince is probably still in that conversation for could be the first to go, just because of the chaotic nature of Reading at this point in time. Obviously that 4-0 hammering against Rotherham at the weekend really didn't help out his cause for this one either. I think, to be honest, considering their run they went on last season, they probably gave Paunovic more than enough time to go ahead and turn things right, and if they do afford that luxury to Ince this time around, you know, if they do go on a bad run, then maybe there probably will be someone else actually who is fired before him. But if we get any more showings like we did at the weekend from Reading, then yeah, I'd have to chuck him into that conversation. Considering Rotherham have only played 2 matches so far this season, I think that all the Rotherham fans will really be quite happy actually with how those opening 2 matches have gone. In terms of Paul Warne, I think he'll be fine. I could put him into job secure. I just think that because of, you know, Rotherham being heavily tipped for relegation at the start of the season and things like that, should that happen, there is always that unpredictability about what will happen over the manager's future. Paul Warne's been at Rotherham though since 2016 and he has outlasted those previous relegations from this level. It does feel as if at some point something will probably have to give in terms of either Warne keeping this group of players up in the Championship, or maybe that change will happen. But going off what we've seen from this squad so far this season, the fact that he's closing in on 300 games managed now for Rotherham, I think he'll be fine, even if that relegation was to come. Next then for Liam Richardson in at Wigan Athletic. Honestly, I think he'll be fine. Going off Wigan's first few matches of this Championship season, the fact of how well they actually did in League One last time around as well, I think that all the fan base there is built into that project, and it's always a tough one with the newly promoted clubs because obviously if you don't acclimatise to the level, you know, soon on into this season, things can get quite difficult for you, especially if that first win takes them quite a while to get. However, I've generally liked what I've seen from Wigan so far this season. He's a good young upcoming coach and I think he's already got enough in the bank to the point where if things do go wrong for him, he's got quite a bit of credit to go ahead and lean on. And the same can be said for Paul Heckingbottom in at Sheffield United as well. I think he'll be fine. I certainly think that the expectations are, you know, right up there with Sheffield United this season, that they should be competing in amongst the top end of the Championship. But his record there last season was really quite stellar, you know, taken from the point where he took over at Sheffield United. They were there or thereabouts in terms of averaging the points it would take to go ahead and finish in the top 2. A playoff defeat last time, but I think he certainly proved his worth to this group last season, that he's more than good enough for the role. And then finally for Steve Morison in at Cardiff, I'm between these 2 tiers for Steve Morison, between he'll be fine and variable. I might chuck it in variable just because there are a few unknowns about Cardiff this season, because it is, you know, such an extensive rebuild with how many players that have come into the club, that of course there is the potential for that to go wrong and, you know, unravel perhaps in a few game weeks. I don't think that'll happen. I think that Cardiff will be pretty comfortable this season really. And I think that more so than putting the pressure on Morison in terms of a league finish, I think that Cardiff fans wanted to see a general progression in terms of the style of play, a new philosophy going forward, and I think that as long as that is delivered and they're not in contention for relegation or anything like that, I don't feel like there's massive expectations upon this Cardiff side this season, which probably plays into his favour as well. So yeah, either of those 2 tiers for me. But that right there, guys, is what I'm currently thinking in terms of managerial job security in the Championship. I'd be very interested to know if you guys would disagree with any of these. Would you have any managers higher, any managers lower? Do let me know in the comments down below. But that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all in the next one.